The share price has had something of a rocky 18 months, but will this month's latest earnings update from Facebook be liked by investors? Hello, I'm David Jones. I've been a technical analyst in financial markets for the last 25 years, and this is our YouTube channel dedicated to looking at US stocks ahead of and after earnings to see where the opportunities might be. This time around, we're looking at Facebook. We've got earnings out towards the end of October. In a second, I'm going to talk about the fundamentals and what to look out for in a bit more detail. Then we'll get back into the chart and really drill down on what's been going on with the price and where the opportunities might be. But first of all, let's take a quick look at what's been going on over the last couple of years with Facebook shares. As usual, if you're watching and you don't subscribe, if you can subscribe, support the channel, and we'll continue pushing out content like this. But let's take a look at what Facebook shares have been doing over the last 2 years. So let's have a quick look at what's been going on with Facebook over the last couple of years. I'll talk about the earnings then in a bit more detail. Then we'll come back on the chart and drill down and see where the opportunities might be. So the Facebook shares back in July 2018 hit all-time highs. Those all-time highs up at $219 a share. Then you can see into the end of 2018 that the price, it didn't quite halve, but it lost almost $100. And then the story for much of this year has been one of recovery. The last earnings came out in July, so late July. We saw the shares almost up at 210, but since then they had been in reverse. Right up until the beginning of October, the beginning of this month, we've seen them claw back a big chunk of those losses, and we've still got the earnings for this month to come. So what I'm going to do, I still think there could be opportunities here because we're bound to see some volatility, I would have thought, over these earnings. I'm going to talk about Facebook, the fundamentals, the upcoming earnings in a bit more detail. Then we'll come back onto the chart. We're going to go back onto the chart in a couple of minutes' time and look at things in a bit more detail and see where the opportunity may be. But let's first of all talk about the earnings. Facebook, of course, is the granddad of social media. It's not just Facebook, it also owns Instagram and WhatsApp. We had their last earnings out towards the end of July. Back then, the expectation was that the company was going to make profits of about $1.88 per share. It came in actually and beat expectations. So Facebook last time around reported $1.99 in terms of earnings per share. User growth was in line with expectations, and at the time, Facebook said it had an incredible 1.59 billion daily active users. But of course, it's had its fair amount of scandal over the last 18 months. And again, going back to July, it struck a deal with the Federal Trade Commission, settling for a $5 billion fine over the Cambridge Analytica scandal where users' data was improperly accessed. So let's look ahead to the next set of earnings. They're expected on the 30th of October. User growth is expected to slow slightly. We were forecasting this back in July, but it never happened. User growth ticked up slightly, but this time around we're expecting user growth to have dropped to around about 26%. It is, of course, something of a mature business now. It's been around what feels like forever. So perhaps we don't see the same sort of fireworks and volatility that we get with other tech stocks. But we're going to look at the chart in a second. First of all, let's look at the big levels to watch ahead and after these earnings. So we've got to go back to last year for the all-time high for Facebook. That was up at $219. But there's a couple of levels a bit more interesting, closer to where we are now. So first of all, it's $209 a share. That was the high hit before the last set of earnings. And since then, they've been in reverse. And then we have a much closer level, 193 from September. I think if we can clear 193, we can start then looking for a move back into the 200s, maybe challenging that July high. On the downside, we've got some really big levels to watch if the share price gets hit over the earnings, and it's really running from that sort of 159, 160 through to 173 area. It's been good support. We'll see that in a second on the chart. So again, I think if we have a negative reaction by the market, watch that for the buyers stepping back in. But let's take a look at the charts. Let's look at these levels and see why they're important and how it might play out over the earnings. So first of all, let's just look at some of the price action for Facebook. I've gone back to 2018 when we saw those all-time highs set up at $219. Then we saw a big gap in the share price, and is often the case. It settles down a little bit, but then establishes this new trend. And this downtrend did a great job in the second half of 2018 in stopping any recovery. So we can see various attempts to rally up the trend line was a good sort of cap for any progress, and the shares moved lower. But things have changed this year. So we saw that trend line, that downtrend break at the beginning of the year, and Facebook established this new trend, but then fell out of it in May. But I think what's interesting for me is even though something falls out of a trend line, it doesn't necessarily mean that trend is over. It could just mean that trend continues, but at a slower pace. And that's definitely been the case with Facebook. So when the market sold off into late May, we held above these old lows, 159. And I think these are still important levels. You know, if we did see Facebook come under some pressure into the end of the year, pushes out again towards 209 into July. Then we have those July earnings. And once again, the share price got hit. So again, into October, we've seen it fall out of the trend line, but it has recovered quite strongly over the last couple of weeks. So broadly speaking, over the last 6 months or so, I suppose you could say we've got this wide, somewhat erratic sideways trading range for Facebook. It's perhaps a bit less exciting than some of the other shares we've looked at, the likes of Tesla and Netflix, but I think there are still opportunities. Clearly, there's an awful lot of support running from the sort of the 160 area up to 173. So if we had a shock on earnings and it sells off into this level, I think, again, waiting to see if buyers come in could be a good opportunity from a price action point of view. On the upside, I think it is still positive. You know, it's fallen out of this downtrend. We've seen that happen a couple of times during 2019. But I think in the short term, if we can clear the old highs in September, they're left up around about 193. Then the next obvious target is for a run back up to the highs for this year, just ahead of that 210 level, just before the last earnings. And if we can break through there, then clearly the all-time highs just ahead of 220 get opened up. I think on the downside, it's only if it slips below this massive level of support around about 159 do we have to worry about a much deeper sell-off. In the short term, it is overbought. We can see on the RSI down here, you know, it's looking pretty extreme. Not surprising, perhaps, given the run it's had so far in October. And this RSI hasn't done too bad a job of calling the turning points on the downside over the last few months. So again, if we saw a disappointing reaction, perhaps that's the best thing from a trading or investing point of view when it comes to Facebook over the earnings. Saw it get knocked back. Let's see if the RSI goes oversold and see if these old support levels hold. So overall, a little bit sideways over the last few months or so, but I think there are still opportunities on these earnings, and perhaps the better opportunity is if the market initially is disappointed and we look for a buying opportunity, looking for a run back up towards 200. As usual though, when the earnings come out, we'll do an update and we'll see how the market has reacted to the latest set of Facebook figures. That's it for our update on Facebook. As usual, we'll do an update after the earnings have come out. We'll see how the stock reacts. To never miss out on our content on US stocks, make sure you're subscribed, click the alarm bell notification, and you'll get notified by YouTube whenever we upload new content. But for this Facebook update from me, David Jones, good luck with your trading.